How does Iowa replace one of the best punt and kick returners to ever play at Iowa? We'll talk about the return duties and who is battling for those all-important special teams opportunities. But first, a reminder to please hit that like button, hit the thumbs up button here on the video. Please subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, please turn notifications on, do everything you can to help out the channel, because the more you help out me, the more content you'll get. And certainly it's all free here. That's what's great about from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Free coverage, free post-game stuff, breakdowns, news, notes, everything right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm all year round. Also want to thank our sponsor, Ascent Nutrition. They've got some tremendous products, the least of which being this Ascent coffee. This stuff, I happen to have the ground bag here, but this stuff is great. You can smell it through the bag. It smells awesome. It's great tasting. It's pure. It's clean. It's mold and mycotoxin free. If you've not already done so, visit goascentnutrition.com, and any purchase supports this channel. If you use the code Hawkeyes, you got to use that code. And by a way of thanking you for using that code, you'll get 15% off. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off at goascentnutrition.com. Get a bag of this stuff. Pure, mycotoxin-free coffee. All right, the punt and kicking duties, the punt return and kicking return duties, I should say, certainly a battle this fall camp, and have heard a number of different reports. We didn't really see any of those duties demonstrated at the open scrimmage back on Kids Day. Whether that was just by chance or orchestrated, we don't know. I can tell you this. Early on in fall camp, I was hearing Kaden Weijin's name brought up, the JUCO transfer who is kind of flown under the radar, had a nice spring. Obviously, Iowa dealt with a lot of injuries in the spring, but kind of flew under the radar. Had heard his name brought up. Somebody had told me that he was maybe the fastest guy on the team, or at least they believed he was the fastest guy on the team. And that certainly tickles the ears of fans. But at the time, it seemed like Kaden Weijin maybe was in front as far as taking the brunt of those returns. So now, as we've gone through the months and through summer and now into fall, other names have popped up. I want to talk about some of the top options. I know Kirk Ferentz alluded to some of them at Big Ten Media Day, but that's been a pretty important position for Iowa in recent years. You think about what Amir Smith-Marset gave you primarily on kick returns, Charlie Jones, what he gave you on both punt and kick returns, even Desmond King. He was a tremendous punt returner in his day, and Iowa's had its fair share of struggles at that position. Max Cooper wasn't great at doing it. Nico Reganey has done it, and I didn't think he was great at doing it when he took his hand at it. And then Josh Jackson's another guy. I mean, one of the greater cornerbacks to ever play under Kirk Ferentz, and yet that's not a skill that everybody has. So punt and kick return is a very select, special skill, and not everybody has a knack for it. But who are the top options to replace Charlie Jones' production? We know he'll be doing the same thing at Purdue. We'll start with, in no particular order, we'll start with Iowa's the reigning defensive back of the year in the Big Ten Conference, Riley Moss. Now, sometimes great players are just great players, right? And I think Riley has an opportunity to be a great player. I do think that, this is just my honest opinion, it's not me being a hater. I think naming him the defensive back of the year last year in the Big Ten was a bit premature. I thought Dane Belton was more deserving than Riley Moss was last year. And I think Riley understands that he's got ways to improve, and you hope he's made that jump heading into the season. Certainly he needs to if he wants to be a moderately high NFL draft pick. But certainly if he could develop the skill of punt and kick returning, that would help his case for a spot in the league. Again, it's a special skill. We don't know if Riley Moss has it. He certainly has speed. He was a track athlete in Ankeny in high school, a really good track athlete. So perhaps he's a guy who can help you and kind of stem the tide, if you will, of what Charlie Jones is leaving behind. Now, the second one might be my most intriguing option, and that is sophomore Cooper DeJean. Here's a guy who was a multi-sport athlete in high school, certainly has the ability to play on both sides of the ball. He is I want to call him a freak. I don't even know that he's 6 foot. I think he's listed at 6'1" on the Iowa roster. I've stood next to him. I think he's maybe closer to 5'11", but he does have a special skill set. We know he's played some cornerback at Iowa so far. He played cornerback at Iowa during the bowl game last year against Kentucky. He can play. I projected him more as a safety. Right now, he's listed as the cash. Of course, we'll get updated depth charts tomorrow for game week, but he's a guy who is certainly intriguing. And he might be my number one option right now if I was to actually list guys in order. If again, not seeing what he's actually doing and his ability, in that role. But just thinking about personnel, he's the most intriguing, and I think maybe the guy potentially with the most upside. However, speaking of upside, let's talk about a guy in Kaden Weijin. Here's a guy who did it at the JUCO level: return kicks, return punts, scored on some kick and punt returns at the JUCO level. Again, I mentioned earlier that somebody had told me that they believed he was the fastest guy on the team, and that was maybe 2 or 3 months ago. Since then, maybe a little bit less as far as hype around this guy. He is a walk-on who's coming here to earn a scholarship. We know, is thin at wide receiver. They could use him, a guy with experience doing that. It's certainly different when you're talking about the Big Ten FBS level, but Kaden Weijin is an option. Arlen Bruce IV, I think that might be the fans' choice. He may be the fans' choice, and he may be Iowa's choice if the wide receiver room is healthy. But let's be honest, that wide receiver room has not been healthy, and it scares me to death bringing out a guy who's been the only constant as far as health in the wide receiver room, at least from a guy who's a scholarship player, and putting him back returning punts and or kicks. That just scares me. And you can't play scared. You want to play your best guys. Unless Arlen Bruce is leaps and bounds above everybody else on this list, then I would be very cautious in putting him out there on special teams because his health is of utmost importance. Now, if Keegan Johnson's back to 100%, if Nico Reganey is getting close to being back, if Brody Brecht is coming along in his development, if Jacob Bostic is further along than maybe I thought, then okay, maybe you're willing to roll the dice with Arlen Bruce, but his health is very, very important, but he does have the athleticism and the quickness that you want in a guy returning, especially punts, but kicks as well. And number 5, final one, is kind of a combination of guys. Could it be someone like Terry Roberts? Kirk Ferentz brought him up at media days. He's been a special teams star for years. Now he's going to get his hand on the defense. But look, if he's not starting, if Jamari Harris and Riley Moss end up being the starting corners, if he's one of your best players, put him out there, right? I think the consensus with most coaches is you want to play your best guys. And we've seen Iowa kind of go with that philosophy along that offensive line. I would encourage them to do the same thing with special teams action. Certainly, you don't want to have to factor injuries, but when you're in extreme cases like the wide receiver room and their situation, I think you got to weigh it. But for a guy like Terry Roberts, he may be a guy who is just one of your best players, and you don't really have a spot for him right now because Jamari Harris and Riley Moss are just a notch above. So you play him in kick and or punt return duties. Gavin Williams has gotten some run during fall camp, returning punts and kicks. LeSean Williams is an option. Is Jazzy Patterson going to redshirt? Or could he potentially factor in? They're not real deep at running back, so he may be called on offense anyways. And then you look at a guy like Nico Reganey. I brought him up earlier. He's done it before. Do I prefer Nico Reganey to be returning punts and kicks? No, because I didn't think he was very good at it the first time. And that's no offense to Nico Reganey. Not everybody has that skill set. There are a very select number of guys who can do it effectively and certainly to the level of a Tim Dwight or a Charlie Jones. And I would put those two guys in similar territory. Could it be a guy like Xavier Wampa? He certainly, I would have to think, is one of your better players. Will he end up on the depth chart tomorrow? That's a question mark. Could it be a guy like TJ Hall, who had a really good spring as a true freshman? They've got options there, and maybe there's somebody emerging that we're not aware of. Could it be a Jordan Cum, who's a JUCO transfer in? A number of options, number of possibilities, but we'll just have to wait and see. But those are my guys, really those top 4. Riley Moss, Cooper DeJean, Kaden Weijin, Arlen Bruce. I would watch for one of those 4 guys to emerge. And then maybe Gavin Williams on kick return duties, but we'll have to wait and see. It'd be nice if they could have a couple guys they're comfortable with, because I don't think that's one thing they've not had. Even when we saw it when Charlie Jones went down, Iowa struggled to be adequate with punt return duties, and that's a special skill when we're talking about field position and the need to protect the football. And that's the main thing. You got to be able to field the ball. If you're not able to field the ball, forget what you can do after catching the ball, because muffs can change the game. We saw it. We've seen it against Wisconsin a couple of times in the past few years. Appreciate you tuning in for another segment of the show here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Great content. We got tons of content dropping all week long. Scheduled previews. We're looking at roster inside and out. We'll have Don Patterson on later this week as well. Post-game coverage after South Dakota State. Keep it locked in right here. Plus my picks coming for week 1. We'll be releasing that midweek. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.